Hey folks, this is Veronica with the Houseplant Coach podcast and Oh Happy Plants. And I did that wrong, but I'm just actually going to leave it because, welcome to me not doing the introduction the same every time. There are some days that I try to say, hey, welcome to the Houseplant Coach podcast. This is Veronica with Oh Happy Plants. And I screw it up 8 times in a row. And I'm there throwing it away every single time. So I was having a conversation with a friend of mine. Hi, lady, you know who you are. And if you listen to this, I don't even know if she listens to this. But anyway, this morning we were sending voice messages back and forth as one does when one is, late 30s, early 40s with a lot on their plate and doesn't have time for phone calls. I love the voice message, by the way. It's just like this. This is I'm leaving you a little voicemail. And it's just nice because there's no freaking pressure on when you listen to it. And honestly, with my friends, I tell them, hey, you don't even need to respond to this. Once in a while, it's nice to have a response if it's me asking a question. But we just talk at each other and we feel connected and we don't have to schedule shit. Though we do still do that. But anyway, so this morning, we were talking about stuff just fucking start, in terms of starting businesses or whatever. She was talking about a podcast and she's like, those people didn't get permission from anyone. They just fucking started this podcast. I just started one day. I think I'd had, or maybe I suggested it. Maybe I brought it up hey, I'm thinking about starting a podcast, and people encouraged me, but just freaking start. Whatever the thing is, nobody's going to tell you that it's going to be successful until you just freaking start and make it successful. Just do the thing. And the other thing we were talking about was, shit, I forgot. Oh, the thoughts just bounce around in there sometimes. The other thing we were talking about was how God, I really did forget. Oh my goodness, I was standing at my stove when I left her this message. And I completely forgot. I got trees from Arbor Day today. That doesn't ring a bell. I'm trying to ring those bells. But yeah, just start the thing. Nobody's going to tell you you get to. Nobody's going to tell you you deserve to. Oh, I was telling one of the other pieces was I was talking about how deserve is such a human, bullying human construct. So I read something yesterday and I shared it with my kid that cats know what thievery is. It was some meme and it was talking about how cats know what mischief is. They know what naughty is. And they do it on purpose. And how a squirrel knows, or a dog, say a dog knows good and bad. But they don't know naughty. Naughty is bad on purpose. They're not trying to be bad because they enjoy being bad. They're doing something that their owner doesn't want them to, and then they feel bad about it. Sometimes they do. Not for the sheer pleasure of it. If you've ever seen American Gods, or read it, if you remember the character Mad Sweeney, who is a leprechaun, God, I'm sorry if I just wrecked it for anybody. He's Irish. Shit. Do I have to start this over? Do I need to? It's not gonna ruin everything. Because it's really obvious. Okay, sorry if that's a spoiler. I apologize. I'm not going to start this over. Anyway, I'm do I delete 4 minutes of my life and then redo it? And I wouldn't even get to this point probably. But anyway, so he is this Irish guy who wants to fight somebody. And he's I love to fight just for the sheer fucking joy of it. And he's fucking insane, this guy. And so that's kind of like cats with naughtiness. They do it for the joy of it. A dog will do something they know is not right, but not because it's not right. Or, something they know that their owner doesn't want them to do, their person. But it's not, they're not doing it to spite you. They're doing it because they want to do the thing, even if they know it's bad. And a squirrel doesn't have a concept of stealing, whereas a cat maybe does steal and run away. A squirrel thinks about this thing in front of them. There's a nut over there and they want it. And then they take it and they have it. And they can conceptualize those things, but they don't know that it's stealing if the nut belonged to somebody else. Even if that squirrel over there has a nut and they're going to take it, they just know they have to run really fast if that squirrel had it. They have to outrun the other squirrel, so then the nut can be theirs. I don't know that they're mischievous enough to understand that they just stole that and the nut rightfully belongs to the first squirrel. I don't know. Now that I'm saying that, I'm not entirely sure, but whatever. Anyway, so back to the sense of whether or not we deserve something. Like, do we deserve to have a small business that supports us and gives us whatever freedom we want? Why is that the fucking question? Like, that is your inner little baby bully trying to keep you small, trying to keep you in a tiny little sandbox, and you don't need it. You don't need to stay small. The whole staying small, we think it's safe, blah, blah, blah. It's not. Guess what? You're just as likely to be run down by a truck in your little baby sandbox as you are doing something else in a bigger sandbox. So, not to get morbid or anything, but I mean, welcome to life. Why don't we get morbid? Like, why did philosophers keep a skull on their desk? It was to remind them that they were going to die. So, like, do some shit with yourself. Don't wait. Because once again, as evidenced by my life, well, not mine specifically, but someone in my life, you don't know that you're going to wake up in the morning. So, go do the thing, because you're freaking worth it. And if anyone, including yourself, tells you you're not, then you bitch slap them right in the face, okay? Anyway, so I'm feeling like I'm on a little bit of a kick this morning in terms of, an intolerance for our inner bullshit. So that translates into pep talks. But really, what I wanted to come in here and say is a couple of things. So, before I forget, the thing I'm going to talk about this episode is magic, and a very specific type of magic that was disproven by quote-unquote scientists somewhere around the 14th century, maybe later. I don't know. I can't remember, but I looked it up at one point. I think I already did an episode, but then I had somebody insisting that magic was real on one of my ads this week. And, I mean, I'll get into it in a minute. Anyway, so that's not where we're going first. The first thing, I had an encounter this week with someone who was, I'm not gonna go into details, but a condescending person who thinks that they are doing good in the world, but they come off really thoroughly as condescending, and it's one of those things where if you responded to them by, like sticking to your point, their response is even more of the digging in of the heels. And they're standing there coming from a teaching perspective. But the first part is no one walked in and said, hey, will you teach me this thing I need to learn? And also, it's hard if they don't know what they're talking about. That's another hard piece of this. So there was a situation where I was like, here's a person who is largely lovely and also thinks they know a whole lot about something, and they have not been in the field for ages. And I don't want to be a bitch, And also, don't walk into my space and tell me I'm wrong about something that you have not been keeping up with research on for maybe 30 years, you know? And walking in and telling people who have lived the experience of something that is, you know, not well researched, arguably, and tell them that they're wrong. Like standing in a place of obvious misunderstanding of the original point. And so it got me thinking about the privilege of teaching and how lucky I feel to be able to convey information to people. And anybody who's listening to this podcast and wanting to learn things in any of the spaces that I occupy and try to teach, anybody who's walking in and saying, wow, I learned this thing from you, I'm so grateful to you, because it's a real privilege to be allowed to be someone's teacher. And also, it's our job, I think, as, you know, certainly as adults, but even as kids, to choose good teachers for ourselves. And that's, you know, so I met Sean on the internet, and I don't know if he was really open about that. I've always been open about that. Internet dating seems so efficient to me. If you do it right, it can be really efficient. A lot of people, like, they send a message or 3 messages and they're like, hey, you want to meet up? And I'm just like, no, like, what if I'm bored? And if you have ADHD, then you know that is the thing that is death. So when I met Sean, I was in a place where I was like, you know, I don't have time or desire to like get myself all dolled up and go out on a date if I might be bored. You know, like if I'm not attracted to somebody, no harm, no foul. Friendship exists, right? If somebody is like, you know, wonderful in their brain and there's not chemistry, then it's like, okay, that's fine. But if somebody, like, even if there is physical chemistry, if a person is like dumb as a box of rocks, I just can't, you know? You got to be able to connect with people that you're in the same room with, right? Like, I don't want to spend time with somebody that I can't connect with. And so I implemented this system because, as one does, and I don't know if anybody else out here. I had a friend last spring, maybe about a little over a year ago, mentioned to me that he thought I was not just ADHD, but ADHD. So like on the autism spectrum. And at first I was like, no, I can make eye contact just fine. And then I'm like, but I do have to force myself to do it. And like, oh no, I can connect with people. I have empathy. And it's like, do I though? Because I walk through life assuming that every single person in the world has the capacity to do all the things that I can do. Unless they have, you know, like I don't want to say an obvious disability, but like, I know that exists from a logical standpoint. But when I'm sitting here in this place and I like built a business from nothing, just because I Googled shit a lot, you know, because I can look things up, and because, you know, whether it's tax code or, you know, science shit or whatever, like I can just do this. And I have people telling me that not everybody can do that. And I can't conceptualize the fact that people can't just fucking Google stuff. But a lot of people have a hard time knowing which terms to search for. And so my brain has a hard time linking those things. Like logically, I know that people have different abilities and also different skill sets for sure. But when I am moving furniture with someone and they don't understand that if you tweak it, like if you lift a couch this way and turn it that way, it'll fit through the door. And it's just not like a natural, obvious thing in their brain. It kind of like there's a wrench in my gears in my head. It doesn't make sense that isn't just common knowledge. And So to me, that says there's a lack of empathy. There's a lack of the ability to connect the wires that empathy requires. Anyway, it's a weird experience. It's been a weird experience. But so I had this friend tell me that, and then I mentioned something recently about it, and another friend of mine was like, oh, you too? Really? All my friends are. And I'm like, well, your whole family also is. So like they say, we find each other. Certainly ADHD folks do. Apparently, if all of your friends are autistic, then you probably are too. And that's just a thing because we communicate with each other. We get it. We get each other better. And so it makes sense. So anyway, then I had another person say, oh yeah, I was going to say something, but a lot of people don't like to be told that they're autistic because there's such a negative connotation about it, And like, here's me who could do whatever, who could fit into whatever social situation I needed to, simply by being open and friendly, or guarded if I need to be. Like, I can read a room. I walk into rooms and I sense emotions. I can sense people's emotions better than most people. And like emotions, and I don't know if it's logicking my way through to like the mechanics of how emotions are impacting thought and belief. But I pick up on shit. And so the autism spectrum was never somewhere I put myself, but I think it's mainly because the diagnostic criteria in the DSM-5 needs to go pound sand. Like it's the diagnostic manual is based on what it looks like when someone is obviously autistic and in an environment that they are not supported in. So a person having a meltdown is just at the end of their rope because they can't handle XYZ thing, whether it's like, this thing is too loud, the refrigerator is buzzing, their clothes are scratchy, and now you're asking them to do some other task that they find a little bit challenging, or something like that. So I don't have meltdowns like that because the majority of the time I can handle the little triggers, and also as far as spectrum stuff goes, like, I think we all understand how that works, right? Like it's like a color wheel and you have little bits of this and that and the other thing. It's like a fucking recipe. Like, what's your favorite pie? What do you put into it? That's the flavor of autistic you are, like, and it's not like it's a choice, but it's more like different ingredients, different types of sensitivities, different little bits of how your brain work one direction or another in terms of neurodivergence, instead of someone is either very autistic or not very autistic. And I don't have mine figured out, but it seems to be present. And also this is why I can never work an office job again. I worked an office. Well, I think I've only worked the one like straight office job. All the other ones I've had were a real giant combination of things, hence, the nonsense ADHD. I'd be doing like all the things. And when I interviewed for this office job, I was like, yeah, and if you want me to do your landscaping, I can do that. And I can also fix your sink because I know a little bit about plumbing and I don't know any electrical. And they're like, you're going to be filing. And I'm like, well, what about like reorganizing your entire filing system? I could do that to make it more efficient. They didn't want me to do that. It was fucking boring. Anyway, so yeah. So I worked in this office, and I'm the type of person who says, oh, there's this big issue that nobody's talking about. I'm going to bring it up and put it smack on the table in front of people and insist that we discuss it until we reach resolution, because literally everyone in the office is dancing around this and it's wasting so much time. We would be so much more efficient if we just sorted this out, created some kind of dialogue around it, figured out what the problem is, sorted out whatever hurt feelings there are, but nobody wants to, because the elephant in the room gets to be left alone. And I'm not a person who leaves the elephant alone. And so I'm like, oh, maybe that is an autistic trait. like unable to not poke the elephant. and be like, hey, you guys, I'm tripping over this every time I walk past it. Can we just please sort this out? And then everybody gets mad at me for even mentioning that it exists. I'm that person. So I lasted like 11 months, I think. And I left for a number of other reasons too. And it's not that I couldn't do the work. It's that I can't stand to be around people who are so inefficient with their emotional bullshit. So anyway, yeah. So there's that. Anyway, back to the other thing. Oh, sorry, this is story time. So really, I'm trying to say thank you for letting me be one of your teachers. And the whole thing with Sean. So dating Sean, I developed this system, and I thoroughly recommend that you develop some kind of system that works for your personal goals. This might not be it. Your goals may be different, but I was like, okay, if a couple messages come through and it seems like we have stuff in common and they are, actively engaging instead of asking like dumbass questions like, hey, what's up? Fucking say something. That's not words. That's not thoughtful. Like, what's up? It's like, hey, excuse me, I require you to create a conversation so I can interact with you. That's what they're saying. Don't walk up and give me work. Do the work your damn self. Like, make yourself interesting. And so if I send somebody a message, I'm going to make myself interesting right off the bat, because that's your job when you start a fucking conversation. Anyway, sorry, this is this is ranting. So Sean and I conversed a bit, and it was clear that he was some kind of sparkle nonsense critter. And I was like, yeah, this is fun. And so I was like, okay, so my rule is that I want to have at least a 30-minute phone call with somebody, and I have to leave that call wanting to know more. That's my rule. And once that qualification is met, then I will go out with you, and go meet you in public or whatever. But that was my rule. And I mean, it got me Sean, and it was fast too. There were conversations that I had with some people, and I'd be like, holy shit, that was like pulling teeth. And I know that some people aren't good on the phone, but I don't know that I want to be with somebody who's not at least able to interact with me on the phone in a way that is not like pulling teeth, Like, if you're just, like, I'm not super whatever on the phone, but I can engage someone. And if somebody is not able to engage with me, in that context, then I don't know that I want to date that person, So, like, in a place where I try to always leave space for people who have different, what's the word? God, there was some kind of little wet noise right over there, and I don't know what it was. Anyway, I try to leave space for people who have, like, different comfort levels with things and stuff like that. But what I have noticed is that people who are awkward on the phone are also probably awkward conversationalists. And if a person is going to keep up with me in conversation, like, I don't think I would listen to my own podcast at double speed. And I listen to most podcasts on double speed because they just don't move fast enough. Audiobooks, certainly on double speed. Podcasts, maybe 1.5, because conversationally, the ones that I actually listen to, the people are probably moving fast enough to keep me almost entertained. But even this, I might speed up. With the speed that I'm talking right now, I might speed that up to listen to it just because my brain will run away. It'll wander off into the bushes if somebody moves too slow, and then it's like, then I have to rewind, and then I'm distracted again. Anyway, so when I met Sean, just long story short, we had 2 phone calls, and it was fucking magic. And I was like, damn, this guy's interesting. And he was like, damn, this girl's interesting. And I'm like, okay, where are we gonna, like, what's next? Come on. But that really worked for me. And so systems. God, I'm in the weeds today. Jesus. But really what I meant to say is that on the one of the things that people do when they get on a dating site and like create a profile and stuff is they answer the questions that they're given. And one of the questions was like, what are your favorite movies and TV shows? And my answer, I think, was something like, and Sean responded directly to this. He was like, wow, I haven't even heard of these people. My answer was, this is a boring question, so I'm going to hijack it. And I'm going to give you a list of my favorite teachers. And so I listed off people I consider teachers, people who are absolute inspirations to me. And you know, it can be anyone from your own child, you know, parents, grandparents, actual teachers that you know in life, mentors and stuff, or it can be people that you've read their books and learned from them, whatever, it doesn't matter. But to be on a list of someone else's favorite teacher, or, you know, among favorite teachers, or even just any, like, not even favorite, but like, here is a person that I learn from and enjoy learning from. Here's a person where I find their knowledge valuable. That is an honor right there. And I have people contact me and tell me that this is their favorite plant podcast. And I actually had somebody reach out to me, and I want to say they're psychologists or something, and one of them wanted to be on the podcast. And I'm like to talk about grief, and because I talk about grief. And I'm like, well, number one, I don't have people on the podcast because I don't have the like mental capacity to put that together right now. And so like there's that, but I also like, we're not going to sit here and talk about grief, but I could put together questions that have to do with plants. You know, or a psychologist could interview me about how to manage plants when you're grieving or dealing with some kind of other major psychological issue or trauma or whatever. Because Lord, do I have tips on that, but I feel like I've shared a lot of them already. But anyway, this is 27 minutes to say thank you for allowing me to do this and to, you know, express a passion of mine in a way that shares it and spreads it, because it's a huge honor, honestly. And then now to the actual podcast. So 27 and a half minutes. Here we go. Here's the actual plant information. So I had somebody this week assert to me that, I mean, they didn't say it in this many words, but this is what they were hinting at, that putting Hoyas in cocoa coir or cocoa chips causes root mealies, because root mealies love cocoa. And so number one, I don't know that root mealies love cocoa more than anything else. This person said that they moved everything to Pawn and then the root mealies went away. And I'm like, okay, well, you know, when you move to Pawn, which is a semi-hydro substrate, it's like rocky shit, basically. When you move to that, you clean the roots off, typically. Cleaning the roots will remove root mealies. Could even remove all the eggs and everything. Probably would, or most of them. So you cleaned the root mealies off, and then you put them in a substrate. So of course they didn't get them again. So there's that, number one. And it was, the assertion was, no matter what I did, the root mealies never went away and every Hoya got them. And I'm like, okay, so I don't know where you're getting your Hoyas from, or if you're like sharing soil between them, or what is going on here, but the root mealies don't magically appear out of thin air. And they're not caused by cocoa coir, because then if they were, every other plant in the world with cocoa coir as a substrate or a piece of the substrate would have root mealies. And that's not the case. And I was like, yeah, well, I mean, substrates should be heat treated to kill pathogens and like weed seeds and stuff like that, bugs. And so the fact that you got root mealies says to me that the root mealies were coming from the greenhouse where the Hoya was grown at, or coming in from like imports overseas or whatever. And then if you don't like, you know, do your root scrubbing transition to Pawn technique, then that would go in the soil. And if you don't really clean the roots between times or treat them or whatever, then of course you're going to have root mealies in the new soil because you brought them from the old soil, right? So to the Middle Ages, let's step back to, 1346 or whatever. I don't know when it was, but scientists, by scientists, I mean the pre-science era, like before scientists really existed, but when people were starting to fiddle around with experiments, somebody said spoiling meat causes maggots. And then somebody else said, I'm not sure about that. Spoiling meat might spoil on its own, and then maggots might cause maggots. And somebody else observed a fly landing on a piece of meat that was on a plate, and then later on it got maggots. And so they're like, what's happening here? Because they thought that maggots spontaneously, what was the term? There was a term for this. Maggots spontaneously erupted from spoiling meat. They also thought that vermin, like rodents, would spontaneously appear in a corner that had grain in it. Or like a silo, like grain would cause a mouse to come out of thin air. Magic. And I'm like, okay. So if you have cocoa coir that is free of root mealies, and if you plant a plant that's completely free of root mealies in this cocoa, and you have it in a house that doesn't have any root mealies anywhere to be found, what we're saying is that root mealies will magically appear, having come from nowhere. This is pre-Middle Ages thinking, people. So, anyway, I didn't really get anywhere with this person. I was polite, of course, and I was like, okay, well, it sounds like scrubbing the roots off really did a trick. And, I wonder where these plants were coming from. If all of them had root mealies, I wonder what else, what variables were not being controlled here, because cocoa is treated, it's heat, potting soil ingredients are heat treated before they're sold. This is a thing. This is a standard procedure. And so was the soil, was it a mix of cocoa chips and Fox Farm potting soil or something? Was it coming from somewhere and had been stored in a way that got it root mealies? Or were they coming in on your plants? Where were they coming from? They have to fucking come from somewhere. Anyway, long story short with the fly thing. Sorry, I'm bouncing around. They took some meat. They got 4 different jars because you have to control for variables. And, they probably did the experiment a couple of times. Some of the jars, they put the meat in the jar. They leave it open. The other jars, they put the meat in the jar. They put a cheesecloth over it, and they they didn't have rubber bands, so they probably tied a string around it. And I don't know, other ones, maybe they put it under a plate so it was fully sealed. What did they find out? They found out that the fucking flies can't get through the cheesecloth or through the lid on the jar to get to the meat. So those pieces of meat would spoil in the heat or whatever, but they wouldn't get maggots. And the one where the flies could get to it because the jar was just open, or maybe the meat was sitting on a plate or whatever, and there's flies on it, and then it gets maggots. Because surprise, flies lay eggs and they turn into maggots and then they turn into flies. This is the life cycle of the fly. So this is it's not hard to understand that bugs have to come from somewhere. And if cocoa does not, quote unquote, cause root mealies on your other plants, then putting it with your Hoyas will not cause root mealies, because the cocoa, in fact, does not contain root mealies. If your Hoyas all have root mealies, that's an entirely different problem. So, anyway, I just needed to go on a rant to remind people that science has existed for hundreds of years, and that specific experiment happened hundreds of years ago. And I think that we can trust its validity today in 2024. I mean, if you know something that I don't, if suddenly flies are magically appearing where there weren't any, and like in a hermetically sealed chamber, and then suddenly there's like, you put a little bit of grain in a hermetically sealed chamber and the grain was like sterilized before going in there, and then all of a sudden a mouse appears magically. If magic exists, somebody fucking tell me, because can we use this shit? Like, we're doing it wrong if magic exists, but it doesn't. So, granted, I do believe that magic is just the shit that we don't understand yet, that science hasn't explained yet, because there are things in this world that we don't understand. Like, how do, what is it? Light changing from a photon to a wave, or, you know, light changing from a particle to a wave, based on whatever. Is it based on whether or not we're observing it, or is that the behavior of quarks or some bullshit? I don't know. I haven't read enough about like particle physics and shit, but stuff changes based on human observation. Like, how does it know? That is the type of magic that science will eventually explain, right? And magic is a word that I think scientists don't really like. Some of them don't. Stodgy ones don't. Because it's like, we just don't understand it yet, you know? But it's a word that people put things in the magic category that they are maybe hoping will be unexplainable? Completely unexplainable? I don't know. I don't know why scientists don't like that word. Some of them don't. But honestly, why not lean the fuck in and just be like, oh yeah, it's magic. Like, let's get casual with it. Like, okay, so magic is stuff that science hasn't explained yet. Great. And done. Full stop. You know? Will it explain it eventually? Hopefully, as long as the human race lasts that long. That'll be fun to understand more and more and more, as we've been doing for the past thousands of years. But we don't need to go backwards and start blaming root mealies on a sterile substrate where there were no root mealies before you put the root mealies there. Somehow they get to a soil. And typically, new plants from a greenhouse where bugs exist, because every plant shop, every one I've ever been in, except for one time I went in a plant shop and no matter how hard I looked, I couldn't find a spider mite, and that was a first. I congratulated the owner. And they were like, wow, thanks. And I'm like, yeah, and I have really good eyes, and I know exactly where to look for spider mites, and you don't have any that I could find. And, like, granted, I didn't look at every leaf, but still, that's a fucking feat. I can walk in a plant shop and find spider mites within, like, 30 seconds, usually. Because I know where to look. You know which plants get them, like, which plants usually always have them. I never bring a calathea home without treating it a couple of times. Because they typically always have them. Alocasias too. Crotons, every fucking one. Like Fabian Aurelias, all the time. It's just terrible. But they exist in the world, and they're gonna find the plants they like to eat. I don't know if they're sweeter or something like that. But anyway, if root mealies like Hoyas, I've never gotten a root meal or a Hoya with root mealies. But if they like Hoyas, then, and you have somebody who's growing thousands of Hoyas for sale, then they're going to be in the plants. And chances are they're going to lay eggs before you can kill them all, and those eggs are not going to be affected by things like root drenches and stuff. Not necessarily, unless there's something that I don't know about root drenches. But if it takes long enough for the egg to hatch, it's not going to die, because the poison will be dissipated. You know, it will have been watered away. And then you're bringing home a plant with mealies. So it's just a fact of life when it comes to growing thousands of plants. You just have bugs. And that's why these greenhouses have pest treatment programs. You know, like they have a regular cycle of pesticides that they apply to the plants. And a lot of people believe that good plant health is going to prevent that. And it's like, yeah, well, they actually have studies that show that good quote-unquote fertilization regimens will actually increase the risk of pest damage. because maybe the plants are growing so much, the bugs are like, oh, fuck yeah, this is delicious. It's like a smorgasbord. So there's data that goes kind of both ways. There's a lot of data that says that plants that are stressed, and I think it's proven that, we can say it's pretty official, that plants that are stressed are going to be more susceptible to pathogens and stuff. But what about a plant that's not stressed, but also, another way to think about it is that it might be a stressor for a plant to have excessive nitrogen applications and be growing so quickly that maybe it has a lack of micronutrients or something. Maybe that's the issue. And maybe excessive fertilizer application could increase the incidence of pest attack or damage or whatever, infestation. That might make sense. Because if you have a plant that's growing because of a huge nitrogen kick, but you don't keep all of the little micronutrients in the soil as well, if you don't pay attention to a really good balance, then it might grow really quickly, but grow kind of weak tissue because it doesn't have everything it needs, especially if it doesn't have enough calcium or something like that. So I wonder if that's a part of it. The study that I read that said the thing about fertilizer being, it was oversimplified. It was like, oh, maybe fertilizer is bad because it can cause this. And I'm like, did you think about everything? It didn't mention micronutrients. It didn't mention the rest of what we need to give our plants to make sure that they're growing properly and to make sure their cellular function is good. Because plants produce hormones to fight pest and disease. And I know that they produce less of these hormones if they're grown in the shade. This is why light's so important, one of many reasons. But I wonder if they can't produce as much of those hormones if they're so focused on growth, because maybe light and water and nitrogen or something like that, the basics are covered to such a huge extent that the micronutrients are not keeping up to support the functioning of the plant, producing those hormones to fight things off. That could be it. I made that up. Don't quote me on it. So this is just me trying to figure it out. So that's another research rabbit hole for me to go down to see if I can find data on whether or not that's anything like the case. Anyway, I think this is the end of my rant. So, on the off chance you pay attention to the comments section of ads that I place, if you notice that and you have gotten scared of root mealies in cocoa-based substrates, it's not the cocoa. If you don't have root mealies in your plants already, you're not going to get them from a potting soil. Unless it's a potting soil that's hanging out with root mealies and they get in there. But I think that root mealies aren't really going to be attracted to a bag of soil because they're going for the roots. They want to suck the sap out of the roots. So I don't know if they would be carried in a substrate anyways, because there's nothing for them to eat. They eat sap. I think. I don't think they eat fungus gnats eat the fungus in the soil. Their little larvae eat the fungus in the soil. And so it makes sense for them to go for potting soil, but a root mealy wants the plant present. So if it's just a bag of dirt, there's no plant for them to suck on. I might look that up, but I think I'm correct. You could look that up. Tell me if I'm wrong. I have to go pack soil. It's 1 p.m. I'm already quote-unquote late, but we're not thinking that way today. I had a big trip over the weekend, and so now it's back to it. So if you have soil, I just want to remind folks, I need to revamp my website, the shipping section. I don't know if I can include this. I don't know if Shopify allows me to include this language, but I want to just remind people that I assume that dirt is not an emergency. I just had somebody reach out to me this week and say, hey, if I place an order today, can you have it ready for pickup on Thursday? Because I'm going to have it picked up by somebody who will be in town. And I said, Well, tell me how much dirt it is, because I do have a lot on my plate this week, but most likely yes. So that is the way to do it. You don't have to reach out before you place the order, because then if you don't place the order that day, and like if this person places the order on like Wednesday evening, no, I won't have it ready for pickup Thursday morning. I don't run that way. But if it's placed today, then yeah. So if you place an order already, then contact me and say, hey, is there any way for you to expedite this because I have a situation? You know, whether it's a pickup thing where you're only going to be in Tacoma like one day this week, or if it's a thing where you have plants that are actively dying, or plants that are going to be shipped in bare root and you want to plant them directly in these soils, something like that. If you have a situation, feel free to reach out and I can try to speed things up. I don't make any guarantees on that, but I can do what I can in terms of, you know, working around my schedule with my kid, my schedule with, you know, all of the other crap that goes on in a person's life. And then also, like, I can't do that with every order is the other thing. So I assume that dirt is not an emergency. It may take up to 7 business days, which technically means a week and a half, 10 days-ish. If it takes any longer than that, I always include freebies in your box. Like if I screw things up and I'm late on an order, or if I have like stuff that's coming in and my shipments of products are delayed, then like, you know, my shipments of raw materials, if those are delayed and that impacts your order fulfillment time, then I always include some freebies in the box. But if you are expecting 1 day shipping because you selected a shipping speed that is, you know, I guess like normal UPS from here to Seattle is like a day. So if you're expecting to receive your soil the next day, I'm not Amazon. I'm one person who has a very, very full schedule. And there may be 20 orders in queue in front of you already right now. So please don't contact me the next day and say, hey, where's my dirt? It was supposed to be here today, because there's fulfillment time to consider as well. And so I don't assume dirt's an emergency, because usually it's not. And like emergencies are like you cut your foot off, you need to go to the emergency room. Dirt is not that. And I also, I mean, technically, never mind. Yeah, so I don't do that, but if you do have a situation where you need your dirt sooner, I really need you to not wait 7 days and then say, hey, where's my dirt? It was supposed to be here. Instead, you know, and then tell me that you had a reason for wanting it sooner 7 days later. Tell me right when you place your order, please. I need help from you, because I can't magically read your mind and get your order out faster. And I want you to have dirt if you need it sooner. So there's that too. Like if you're going on vacation and you don't want the box to get there, like, you know, while you're gone or something. Like I actually had a friend stop by and grab a couple boxes over the weekend because I didn't want them just sitting on my porch. And like it was socks, but still, you know, just in case. And one I thought was going to be trees, but they actually came today. So that's another thing. Don't leave your plant mail sitting in the sun. That's important. But yeah, if you have a situation like that, like you're going to be gone and you don't want a box on your porch, or you need the soil because you have imports arriving at a certain time, and even if you forgot to place the order 2 weeks ago and you're like, well, shit, I made an issue, then like reach out. I'll see what I can do, because I want to make things easy on you, and I want to, you know, I will do my best to move things along. I just have to know as early as possible, because I can't read minds, because I'm one of those people without superpowers. So anyway, please do that. But really, this is just kind of a PSA, like, hey, expect a fulfillment delay, please, because I am not Amazon. It's me packing dirt in my garage, and I don't stay up all night to do it, because sleep is really important. So, yeah. Anyway, this is a ridiculous podcast. I would apologize, but instead I'll just put a disclaimer in the episode description. 27 and a half minutes. Okay. I hope everybody's enjoying the gorgeous weather. It's fully blue skies outside. The tree next door is starting to leaf out. It's really beautiful. I don't know why my dog is sleeping on the couch right now, but I think it's because I'm inside. I hope everybody's doing well, making plans for springtime, doing some gardening or planty stuff inside if that's what you've got. Yeah. Oh, I think I may have mentioned already, I'm going to start going live, I think probably on my Facebook page. I think I can do that. And then also in the member site, which is members.ohhappyplants.online. My goal, I think, is to do like once a month and just pop in and answer questions for people. Initially, what I might do is come in with a little project to do or something to show you, and then if people have questions, then I can sit down and do a Q&A. But ultimately, I would love to do a pre-scheduled so people know when it is, so it's not a surprise, a pre-scheduled Q&A on the member site so that makes that more of a valuable space for people. So I think I mentioned it in there already. If that sounds like a fun idea to you and you're not in there, it's just members.ohhappyplants.online. And if you go to ohhappyplants.com, there's a link to it. I am going to be redoing my websites because they're like the house that was built small and then a person kept having children and kept adding rooms, and now it looks like a Frankenstein house, just like this big monstrosity of a thing. So that's all of my online presence because I started small and I kept adding things and I have not streamlined anything. So apologies for how everything looks. It's terrible. That's going to happen one of these days, a total revamp. But the member site is totally free. And if you have a plant question and like email me or, send me a message on Facebook or something like that. I actually think I disabled messages for Oh Happy Plants on Facebook. But if you have a plant question, not a product question, those I can answer through email just fine. But if you have a plant question, I send people with plant questions to the member site because then my answer is public for other people to see. So when you ask plant questions, you're helping more information be available for others. You're helping build that repository of information. If I answer on an individual basis, then I am spending my time answering one person and no one else gets that information. So it helps one person instead of making a bigger impact. And I'm one person also. And I can't answer all the questions one-on-one because I get so many questions. So it would be a huge favor to me if folks would take their plant questions to the member site and ask them there. And I do my best right now to get in about once a month to answer questions. I am working to do more than that, to get in more often, so it's not as big of a lag time. At this moment, I do not do emergency plant care questions. I don't pressure myself in terms of giving away time for free. I have to feed my child, so that's the priority. I also have to sleep, so I don't have another episode of this illness, autoimmune nonsense that is really impacted by stress. So I don't offer, like emergency free consultations. I'm actually not even offering consultations at all right now just because scheduling meetings is too much for all of the other things I'm trying to do. So I do really appreciate if people can take their questions to that website. And I love answering questions for folks. I love diagnosing things. I love it when you bring me a problem that I can't solve right off the bat and I have to go Google shit for a while. That's fun for me. I learn stuff. So you're helping me learn and you're helping the whole community learn when you post stuff there. But yeah, that's where the lives will most likely be. I'll probably do some on Facebook as well, just to play nice with Facebook's algorithms and stuff. But if you're not a member already, that's a great place to find some more content. And also, I think the majority of the podcasts are posted on there. I need to catch up with the rest of them. But that means that they're searchable by keyword if they're on there, which is really great because I don't think you can do that in a lot of podcast players. Anyway, that is it. That's an hour of nonsense. I hope this helps. If you have bugs So here's the to-do if you have bugs. Know that they came from somewhere. Try to figure out where they came from. If you have spider mites that quote-unquote keep going back after you treat, what's happening is they just were never gone in the first place. A spider mite can lay 350 eggs after she's bred with another spider mite. Scale bugs can reproduce asexually, so if there's one, there may be more. Some scale are all female. I think it's species specific. So I don't know if that's the common ones, San Jose scale and like soft brown scale and stuff that we find on our houseplants. There are like 800 different types of scales. So it might not be the ones that we're used to. They might need male and female bugs to actually reproduce, but I can't remember. But yeah, spider mites, once it has bred, it can lay, one female can lay 350 eggs, and then if you assume half of those are female, then 175 of those are laying 350 eggs, and then half of each of those are laying 350 eggs, and that's a really huge population really freaking fast. So, and they can go from egg to egg-laying adult in 5 days at like 90 degrees-ish. So the hotter it is, the faster they go, the faster they explode. So the reason they don't go away is because you missed a couple of eggs or you missed one adult. And also you can't kill the eggs with like most of the treatments we have. It just doesn't kill the eggs. So you have to keep treating. So treating for stuff once and then saying, oh, I don't see any more. Or bringing home an alocasia and saying, oh, well, I didn't see any obvious bugs, so there must not be any bugs. That's where you're falling short right there. If you keep getting bugs, if you keep getting root mealies and nothing you do will get rid of them, it's because you're not doing the right thing to get rid of them. It's not because the substrate is causing them. They come from somewhere. They don't magically appear. And if you can't get rid of them in a specific substrate, then it might be that your treatment is wrong. It might be that it's not penetrating effectively. It might be any number of things, you know? It might be the wrong treatment for what you're doing. You might be using neem oil, which has been proven half-assed at best and super stinky. There are all sorts of issues with assuming that something keeps coming back instead of it just always was there. Like I had aphids in my plants. When Sean died, I had one plant with aphids, and aphids do spread. A lot of things don't actually really spread that far. Like spider mites will spread if the plants are touching. If there's a really strong breeze blowing from one plant to another, they can blow spider mites to other plants. But they don't like crawl around the room unless all your plants are touching. They're not going to crawl across a table 20 feet to like across the floor and traverse this massive trek just to get to the plant across the room. They don't do that. What they will do is you touch one plant, they hitch a ride on your hands, and they fall off on another plant. They'll do that. But they don't just magically spread. Mealy bugs will travel. I'm not sure about root mealies if they'll go to the next pot over. Like, I think if they're touching, they sure will, but I don't know if they would go all the way across a room or something. But mealy bugs certainly will run around. They'll cross. I've seen them go from, like, desks in an office to, across a line of desks and then, like, across the carpet to get to a file cabinet island in the middle, like 20, 30 feet from where they started. I've seen that happen. Aphids will certainly travel. Scale doesn't really go that far. The crawlers do, but then once they're stationary adults, then they don't move at all. But again, scale bugs, they're slower. Even the crawlers are slower, and they tend to stay more stationary. But yeah. So anyway, I had aphids. And instead of saying, oh my goodness, I treated for aphids and then they came back, where are they coming from? They must be coming in from outside, or I'm going to blame this other thing or whatever. or I brought home a new plant, that must have had aphids too. It's really just that I didn't kill all of them. And that's where they came back from, is they never actually went away. And it took me quite a while to get rid of them and multiple treatments, because usually it does with a lot of bugs. I don't want you to be scared of bugs. I just want you to be aware that if they keep coming back, you just need to treat more frequently for longer. And then eventually you're going to kill them all. So spider mites, instead of treating once and then saying, oh my goodness, they keep coming back every 4 months, I have a huge spider mite infestation. Where are they coming from? I didn't bring home any plants. It must be this dirt. They don't live on dirt. Like, they just don't. And so like soil mites can live on dirt because they're soil mites, but they're not spider mites and they're not harmful to plants. And again, potting soil should be sterile when you get it, if it was heat treated, and all potting soil ingredients are heat treated before they're sent out. Mine certainly are. Not here in-house, but the stuff that I start with is. But then they remain dry until they're mixed. So anyways, it's not some random other thing and they're not appearing out of midair. The infestation is just still in your plants. And if you test if it's root mealies and you test the soil wetness with your finger, and then you go to the next plant and you stick your finger in there and go to the next plant and stick your finger in there, you're transferring eggs or larvae or mealies on your finger to the next plant. That's where they're coming from. It's not, it's probably not even them traveling from pot to pot, especially if it's like across the room. It's your own damn hands. So, and I say this with love, wash your hands. Okay, I'm going to say something really gross. So it's about dead bodies and childbirth. And this is how we learned germs existed. So turn off your brains if you can't handle it, or turn off this podcast. Skip the next full minute. So, okay, here, story time. Ready? Turn it off. So back in the day, before we knew that germs existed, before we knew that there were microscopic things on our hands that could kill us, doctors would go from the morgue, like dissecting dead bodies. They might wipe their hands on a towel, but they would still have dead tissue under their fingernails. And then they would go up and perform exams on women in childbirth. And that's where childbed fever came from, which was unheard of during the time of midwives. It came from that. It came from doctors with dirty hands. This is before we washed with soap. So the same applies for your root mealies. Don't stick your fingers in the dirt and then stick your fingers in other dirt if you're not absolutely sure that they're dead. And root mealies, honestly, I have dealt with them so infrequently, never in Hoyas, but so infrequently in other plants that I don't want you to be scared of secret terrible things in your plants, by the way. If you're a person who freaks out about the mere idea of pests, don't freak out about this. I don't know the prevalence of them, but I have dealt with them so infrequently, and I've dealt with so many plants that I don't think it's something major to worry about, something that you can't see wreaking havoc under the soil. I have dealt with Pythium and Phytophthora way, way more. And Phytophthora, that's I've mostly only seen it in pothos, I think in a couple other plants, but pothos was really common a few years ago for a person to buy a new pothos, and it's beautiful and bushy and huge, and then you bring it home and within a week the stems are turning black and the whole thing has gone wilty and gross. That's Phytophthora. Pythium is when the outer part of the root will slough off and there's just kind of a string in the middle left, and it's a fungal root rot. I've dealt with that way more than any kind of root mealy. So if that sets you at ease, and Pythium and Phytophthora, I'm trying to think of the frequency. It's less than 1% of the plants that I've had from nurseries have had these issues. Maybe between 1 and 2%. But I think it may be less than that. I think it may be less than 1%. Because it's really not something that I worry about. So don't freak out is what I'm trying to say. Don't freak out. Anyway, this is really the end. I gotta go pack soil. I hope you guys are having a fabulous spring, and I hope everybody is, at least finding that they have energy to do some of the things that they enjoy. And also, if you have had a hell of a time this year or this month or this decade or whatever, and your plants are suffering, same. So here's the professional plant nerd saying that you are not alone. Just, try to do a little better tomorrow, or don't and take a nap instead. You have my permission to have a few dead leaves on your plants once in a while, or, a few dead plants in your house once in a while, or a few hundred. If it means you're taking care of yourself, please do that. Don't stress yourself because, don't hate yourself. Don't call yourself a bad plant parent because there's one yellow leaf across the room. I can see, well, there's one. I know there were some dead ones on my Hoya. There's some, what I want to say is fungal, but really, it's fungal, but it's because of low light on that plant right there. There's a dead leaf on the ground from my begonia. It happens. People get busy. Your plants are very quiet with their little screams when they're thirsty. Sorry for that little visual. The dog will bother you. The child will bother you when it gets hungry. The plant won't. So, go easy on yourself. It might wilt, but it doesn't, yell at you and get in your face. And, my certain puppy over there will boop me with his snooter until I pay attention to anything he needs. And plants just don't do that. They wilt a bit, and Ming Aurelias smell like maple syrup when they're stressed. So if you have one that smells like maple syrup all the time, it's because it's stressed. So more light and appropriate water, and if it has pests, straight for pests, it'll do it with pests too. I don't know what it is, what chemical compound, but it's really interesting. And it's similar to maple syrup. It's not exactly like it. But that's the only outward, aside from wilt and firing leaves, and, obviously visual signs of pest or fungal infection. I think that smell is the only outward sign I've seen from a plant that it's pissed off at me. So I guess they do talk, but it's very quiet. Anyway, go easy on yourself. That's the message. Have a great day, guys. Bye.